and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 333, and today's date is April 5th, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief for this Saturday. Before I get started, I just want to thank those people that donated. I am truly thankful. I am grateful that you do donate. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. And for those people who are new, who just subscribed, if you haven't visited the X22report.com site, you can come on over. There are a couple things on the site that I do. I place articles on the site during the day, and on some of them I comment. And I do track products for inflation or deflation. I have a high-level view of what is going on, and it just shows how we're leading up to this economic collapse. And we also have the forum, the people, and this is like-minded people talking about the economic collapse. All of this is free. There is no charge for anything whatsoever, and you can come, you can look at the forum, you can read what people are saying. If you want to join up, all you need is some type of handle or username that you want to be called by and an email, and you pick out your password, and that's it. There's no other charge or anything like that. Same thing on the site. There's no charge or anything like that whatsoever. You can listen to the reports whenever you like, and that's pretty much it. Let's get into the economic collapse news. We're going to head out to Australia. And in Australia, they're having the same exact thing that is happening in all other places. I mean, we see in the UK, we see in the United States, we see in Australia, housing prices continually being pushed up. And right now in Australia, the housing bubble is back in full swing. Prices rose almost 11% over the past year to record levels in absolute terms and near record levels as a share of household income. Prices in Sydney rose about 15%. Household debt as a percentage of income surpassed the previous record. Australian household debt has hit a record 177% of annual disposable income, while housing valuations are flashing red. House prices now equate to 4.3 times annual income and 28 times annual rent, both within a fraction of their historic highs. We are all heading to the same problem. Everything has been pumped up with free money. People, you're seeing prices increase, housing prices increase, and we know what's going to happen sooner or later. This bubble will pop, and everything will come crashing down. And again, we have to understand, before this happens, these private Western central bankers, what they're going to do is they're going to have an event that will take all eyes off of them and place it on another country to cover up this ginormous, horrific collapse which is coming. Now, we have more indication that the economy is not doing well. And I talk a lot about retail, how that is completely imploding. I talk about real estate, how the big players are getting out of the real estate market. They're laying off thousands upon thousands of people in their mortgage departments because they understand the American people are just pretty much tapped out. But we're seeing the Baltic Dry Index again, and it is dropping. This is the 9th day in a row, the worst first quarter in over 10 years. And for those people who don't know what the Baltic Dry Index is, it gives investors insight into global supply and demand trends. This change is often considered a lead indicator of future economic growth or contraction because the goods shipped are raw, pre-production material, which is typically an area with very low levels of speculation. And right now, the Baltic Dry is down 25% in the last 2 weeks, back near post-crisis lows, and has just suffered the worst start to a year in over a decade. So, if we just look around, we can see that all the different areas of the economy are not doing well, except for that area where the bank, the Fed, is pumping up, and that is the stock market, which is the NASDAQ, the S&P, the Dow, all being pumped up, and that's moving up. The banks are receiving cash from the Fed. They're buying up all their toxic real estate, and they're continually doing this. They haven't really stopped this. They are still pumping billions upon billions of dollars into the banks every single month. And all they really did was they diverted some of their funds over to Belgium to pick up the slack for Treasury bond purchasing. So it looks like the Fed is absolutely doing nothing with Treasury bonds, that we're slowing down our pace of purchasing, and all they really did was shift of where this money is going to be used to purchase these Treasury bonds. And I discussed this in another report, but we can see exactly what is happening. This whole entire thing is an illusion. Of course, we had this jobs report out, and we realized that these are completely fake, falsified. These numbers make absolutely no sense compared to what is going on in the industry, and I discussed this many, many times. And we can see this all over. And again, we have to remember, they're doing all of this to make you believe that we're in some type of recovery, because they're out there continually telling us that unemployment's getting better, the stock market's going up, look at this, we can't go bad, it will never come down, it's going to keep going up, we might hit 20,000, and they continually push gold down, push to show that gold is not really reacting. See, so we're in a recovery, everything is fine, because eventually, as we all know, they will create this event. This event will start. We'll get into World War III, and they do believe that when this war is over, they will take control again of the entire system. They'll have the ability to create new currency, so this debt problem will go away. They'll restart it, but what they're trying to do at this point is re-educate the young people of today, because really what they want, and I'm talking about the central bankers, the elite, the globalists, whatever you like to call them, what they really want is the younger generation not to understand their rights, not to understand the Constitution. Actually, they would like to get rid of it at this point. And we can see right now what they are doing. We all understand that the government created, now remember, the government created Common Core, and they want all states to be in on it, and if you don't use it, you do not get the money from the federal government. So all states are in. Some of them are saying, wait, we're looking at this, and this is just absolutely ridiculous, because we have to understand Common Core is developed to re-educate the youth of America, and their first objective is to completely rewrite the Second Amendment. Their second objective is to rewrite the First Amendment and to change some of the history. Now, when everyone thinks of Common Core, they think, oh, it's one textbook. No, there's many, many different Common Core textbooks. There's many. They have to be approved, of course, by Common Core, the federal government, and they have to have certain guidelines that they have to follow, and they have to be in compliant with the curriculum for Common Core. And what's coming out now is we're seeing many of these books really tell different stories of what the rights are of the people. And if we go back to 1913, ever since the Federal Reserve came into power, from the history books from that time, what they did was they completely removed how money is created. They completely removed what the responsibility was of the government to coin money. All of that was completely taken out after 1913, because prior to 1913 we had this. So they were re-educating the population during this time period so people wouldn't be the wiser of what's going on. And in the textbooks right now, approved by the Common Core, of course, for use by students studying for advanced placement history exam, the Second Amendment, and this is the advanced placement, the AP History, the Second Amendment is defined in this way. The people have the right to keep and bear arms in a state militia. Okay, now that's the advanced history class. Now, in another Common Core book, which is approved, there is another statement they made about the Second Amendment, and they define it as this. Citizens have the right to bear arms as member of a militia of a citizen soldiers. Okay, of course these two are completely wrong. This is not the Second Amendment, but they're continually rewriting this as we go along, and each book says something a little different because they're educating the youth of America. And then there are other worksheets that they've come out with for Common Core that history teachers are going to use, and some of these say, I'll give you an example. This one has to do with the Bill of Rights. The government of the United States is currently revisiting the Bill of Rights. They have determined that it is outdated and may not remain in its current form any longer, and we will have the right to change it. Well, that's not right, because all the states, there has to be a consensus of a certain number of states to actually change an amendment, and you can't remove the rights, because the people are born with the rights. And then for elementary school, what they are doing is they're taking it a step further. And I might have mentioned this once before, but I'm going to mention it again. For elementary schools, what they are doing to continually brainwash the younger generation, because they realize if they can get them brainwashed and think in a different way, they won't even know what their rights are. They won't even know what the Constitution is, and it'll be easier to remove it. Right now, this says, the Second Amendment, this amendment states that people have the right to certain weapons, providing that they register them and they have not been in prison. The Founding Fathers included this amendment to prevent the United States from acting like the British, who tried to take weapons away from the colonists. Now, if we look, this is not exactly what happened. The reason for the inclusion of the Second Amendment in the Bill of Rights had little to do with British and more to do with the future attempts by an out-of-control or powerful central authority disarming the American people as a step toward tyranny. Take, for example, these statements by our Founding Fathers regarding the purpose of the passage of this amendment. In 1833, Joseph Story wrote, "The right of the citizens to keep and bear arms has justly be considered as the palladium of the liberties of a republic, since it offers a strong moral check against the usurpation and arbitrary power of rulers, and will generally, even if these are successful in the first instance, enable the people to resist and triumph over them." Alexander Hamilton also said, if the representatives of the people betray their constituents, there is then no resource left but in the exertion of that original right of self-defense, which is paramount to all positive forms of government, and which against the usurpations of the nationals' rulers may be exerted with infinitely better prospect of success than against those of the rulers of an individual state. So what we are seeing here is they are trying to completely re-educate the youth of America. And I know my children, they go to public school right now, and they were in this assembly, which was being presented by the government, and it was called Project Century, and the entire assembly was how bad guns were. Now, again, everyone has their own opinions on weapons, and people have their own right to have these opinions. But when the government purposely sets up false flags, mass shootings, and makes everyone afraid of their own shadow or of a weapon, this is where I have a problem. This is where everyone should have a problem, because if you look at any of those countries where the people do not have weapons, those are the people that are controlled, those are the people that are told what to do, those are the people that have no voice. If you look in Ukraine right now, the first thing they wanted to do was disarm every single individual. And the people are saying, well, no, I don't think you should be disarming us, because we need to protect ourselves. The first thing they want to do, and again, you have to remember, the government in Ukraine was put into place by the United States government. They already had them handpicked, also by the EU. And we can see what they have been trying to do time after time. And now, ever since the Fort Hood shootings right now, they are demonizing veterans, of course, and they're saying the Fort Hood shooting stokes employers' fears over stability of vets. So they're pushing the agenda to show everyone that vets are not stable, they should not have weapons, they shouldn't have jobs, and they're continually pushing their agenda, because their biggest fear is to allow vets to have weapons, because when this collapse comes, who are the people trained with weapons? Who are the people that will get together, create these militias, lead them, because they have experience in the armed forces, and fight against the out-of-control government? Of course, it's the vets, and this is what they are trying to do. Now, ever since Senator Leland Yee was busted for trafficking illegal firearms. Of course, he was a proponent of gun control in California, and he wanted everyone not to have a gun. In the meanwhile, he was the one trafficking illegal firearms. Now, other people like Representatives Jackie Speier, they're out there saying, you know what? Maybe what we should do right now, because of what happened with Senator Leland Yee, maybe we should have all assault weapons completely banned, completely in the United States, and no one should be allowed to import them whatsoever. So they're really pushing this agenda forward at this time. And we all know why they're doing this, because they are afraid when this collapse comes that the people will sit there and say, you know what, this is not the way I want to live. There is a problem here. We should remove the government. And of course, everyone knows there was a representative out there saying Congress is not making enough money. He's making $174,000 a year. And I said, you know what? Just like President Obama told us, if he would like to live a little bit better, maybe he should get rid of his cable. I mean, President Obama told us, to afford health insurance, we should get rid of phones. Maybe we shouldn't have cable. Maybe we should remove things from our lives that we really don't need just to afford health care. Well, I say this to every single person in Congress. If you'd like to have a better life, don't drive such an expensive car. Buy a used car. Maybe you shouldn't be living in such a beautiful house or condo. Maybe you don't need cable. Maybe you don't need phone. Don't buy expensive suits. Don't have a cleaning person. And maybe you can afford living on $174,000 a year. Because you have to remember, the people in Congress, let's see, they get driven around. They have a gym in that they can use free of charge. Most of their meals are free. They're getting a lot of free stuff. And again, we had a poll on the X22Report.com site, and that poll of about 670 people, 99% said no, Congress should not receive a raise, and 1% said yes, and I believe 10 people said yes, they should, and the rest said absolutely not, and I don't believe they should at all. Actually, they should be sacrificing right now, just like everyone else is in the country. And I'm sorry, but I cannot put myself behind these people who are telling us to get Obamacare when they themselves didn't sit down in front of all the people who they're supporting, who voted for them, and they didn't sign up for Obamacare and drop their great government insurance. So I'm sorry, you know what? I really can't do it at this time. I can't be behind your pay raise when there are so many people out in America who are struggling, who are making $20,000, $30,000, who had a full-time job, who don't. Maybe you should start looking into the actual unemployment rate and how it's manipulated. Maybe everyone should be doing their job for the money that you're making instead of receiving more contributions and more gifts from contributors and things like that. All right, let's move on here. Now, the U.S. Navy has developed, I shouldn't say they developed, but another company has developed a piece of software that they can place into any helicopter, which will allow it to become a drone. They can fly it, and it has some type of artificial intelligence where they eventually want it to land where they want it to land. It can hover, it can maneuver. Right now they control it with a tablet, but eventually they want to expand on this where the helicopter will be able to maneuver and land wherever it needs to do it on its own without someone controlling it. And again, DHS is looking at this. Other agencies are looking at this technology to place drones in the air, because it would be great to have a helicopter drone flying around the neighborhoods where it could stop in midair, point down, take pictures, or shoot some type of weapon. And we can see why all this is happening and where they are moving at this point, because we understand that DHS is not for the people. DHS is to control the people when this collapse comes, and it'll be a lot easier if they can disarm every single person at this time. And completely educate the people that they don't have these rights anymore. Because if you really look at some of the laws that are coming out with like the First Amendment of free speech, they're setting up free speech zones. They're telling us there's constitutional free zones. They are educating the people for the future to understand that you really don't have these rights, and we need to completely fight back against this, not with force, but with the people standing up and saying, no, we're not doing this. We are not following. We're not abiding by what you're trying to do here. And the states need to stand up and say, you know what? Common Core is not for us. We reject it. And there's a lot of states that are doing it, but the majority are going with Common Core right now. Now, out in the Ukraine, we understand they are having a very tough economic time, and we understand that S&P downgraded Crimea, and all of a sudden, Moody's is out there, and they are going to downgrade Ukraine because they really have to look at it and say they're in so much debt. Energy prices are going up. People are having a very tough time making ends meet in Ukraine, and it's really getting bad in Ukraine at this point. And they went on to say that Ukraine's government bond rating, they lowered it one notch from CAA2 to CAA3, citing the current political crisis, deepening economic instability as reasons for its negative outlook. And they're saying this default imminent with little prospect for recovery. Well, of course, because you have the IMF in there, you have the bank in there giving more and more debt, and Ukraine can't pay for this debt. There's no way they can do it. It's almost like Greece, Cyprus, France, Portugal, Italy. They are stuck in this area of massing amount of, continually taking on debt, austerity, and having huge amount of unemployment. Now, we understand that the central bankers, U.S. government, like to provoke countries, especially those countries that do not have a private Western central bank. And that has to do with Russia, China, Iran, Syria, North Korea. And we see this happening all over the place here. And we understand that the central bankers are all across the globe trying to maintain and continually prop up the dollar. And they are doing this. They are losing the battle. They understand they're losing, but they're continually trying to provoke other countries. And right now, North Korea is out there saying, we know what you're trying to do. And again, I don't agree with the actions of the leader in North Korea or anything like that, but the North Koreans are out there saying, we understand that the United States is hell-bent on regime change and warn that any maneuvers with intention will be viewed as a red line that will result in countermeasures. And we understand they want them to do something. The United States central bankers, the EU, want the North Koreans to make a move. They want the Russians to make the move. They want China to make the move. They want it to look like the other country is making the move to bring this war forward because they need to have this done as quickly as they possibly can. Now, Tokyo is out there saying that we understand that North Korea is firing mid-range ballistic missiles, and Japan has promised to use one of its destroyers in the Sea of Japan to shoot these missiles down. We understand that Japan has been setting up missiles. They're pointing towards North Korea, and we all understand why all this is happening. We have missiles pointing to China. We have missiles pointing to North Korea. We have the missile shield in Europe. We have the pivot to Asia where bases surrounding China. We have, I guess I'll call it the pivot to Russia now, because they're setting up all military assets surrounding Russia at this time. And we can see how all of this is starting to come about because they understand eventually, one way or another, they will start World War III. Now, we understand in Ukraine, Crimea had a referendum, and they decided they do not want to be part of Ukraine anymore. They're part of Russia. Now there are 1,000 protesters that have gathered in East Ukraine city of Donetsk, and they're saying they want a referendum. They want it on April 18th, and they want to vote to see to completely secede from Ukraine. So we can see this whole coup d'etat in Ukraine is kind of falling apart at this point. So this tells you that they are losing the battle in Ukraine. They're going to be moving to different areas to start, and bring an event here to the United States. Now, it really doesn't matter where this comes from at this point, if it comes from Syria, or if it comes from Russia or China, because I've said this many times, all the players are pretty much the same, and we understand that because of these sanctions, which were not really placed on Russia, they were placed on individuals. Russia started to escalate and push their agenda forward in what they were doing with the ruble, not using the dollar, and we can see that Russia is making deals with China, making deals with India, making deals with North Korea, Iran, all bypassing the dollar right now. And the United States is out there and they're warning Russia right now because they're making deals bypassing the dollar. U.S. has warned Russia, Iran against possible oil barter deal, and we have to remember that Russia has made a deal with Syria, Russia has made a deal with Iran to help with their natural resources. They'll completely bypass the U.S. dollar at this point, and Russia has also made a deal with Iran to supply them with military assets at this time. U.S. says any such deal would trigger sanctions. U.S. has conveyed concerns to Iranian government through all channels. And again, they're pushing the agenda forward. And right now, the voice of Russia is out there saying Russia prepares to attack the petrodollar, which they are pretty much doing at this time. They're making all these deals, making preparations to pretty much remove the U.S. dollar from everything they're doing. China is doing the same thing. Other countries are now doing the same thing. And I've said this before. When you have to remember why the dollar is being, why it has such high value. Maybe not right now, but it has such high value because all the countries across the globe needed to keep U.S. dollars in reserve. And they continually push this to more and more countries because when the Middle Eastern, African countries, they would sell their oil, they had to use U.S. dollars. So all of these countries needed to take on more U.S. dollars and keep them in their reserves. Now with all these deals going across the globe, with China making deals bypassing the dollar, Russia making deals bypassing the dollar, natural resources being sold not using the dollar, countries no longer need to hold on to these dollars. If they no longer need to hold on to these dollars then come back to the United States. That means there are more dollars in circulation. That means the value of your dollar decreases. And this is what we're seeing happening because the direct threat to the dollar is in Africa with China. They have a clearinghouse in Kenya. Most of the African nations now are starting to reverse their reserves. They're putting in more yuan, removing the dollar. In Libya, we understand the Al-Qaeda militants, the rebels, these are actually the people, but the United States likes to call them terrorists. On the other hand, in Syria, the rebels, the paid mercenaries, are fighting with Al-Qaeda against Assad. So they play at both sides. Al-Qaeda in countries they've already taken over and have a puppet government in there are the terrorists, but they're actually the people fighting back to take back their country. The Libyan people there try to sell the oil bypassing the dollar, but we saw what happened. They stopped the ship. U.S. forces boarded it, brought it back, and the sale never went through. And we can see when most of the countries now decide and continually push forward and remove the puppet government and place the oil not using the petrodollar anymore and allow this oil to be sold using other currencies, this will be the demise of the dollar. And we see that United States is losing ground in this fight. They're losing it in Libya. They're losing it in Iraq. This is why they sent Apache helicopters there. This is why the United States is creating this special commando force to go after Al-Qaeda in the Middle Eastern countries, which consist of Yemen, Lebanon, Libya, Iraq, in Sudan, in Central Africa, because these are the people fighting against the puppet government of the United States and the central bankers, and they're setting up this special commando unit because they can't really make their case to reinvade these countries at this time, and they need to maintain the status quo and keep the U.S. dollar in place with the private Western central banks. So they won't be able to keep this for much longer. It is a losing battle, and eventually the people will get stronger. People will fight for their country, and they will eventually push the government, the puppet governments, out of the country, because there is a lot more people than there are of the puppet government and the small armed forces that they have in these countries. And when this happens, a lot of countries are going to start dumping the dollar. This is when you'll see things really go haywire, where the United States will have that event here in the United States to bring us to war. And right now, what fits this story is Iran and Syria, because they are losing the battle in Syria, and they will eventually push the agenda forward. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.